What's up, everybody? We have 10-ish, as usual, minutes here with Ryan Muckenhern across the table from Mark and myself. And today we're going to talk about a cartridge that I'll admit, I don't know if we've seen a suggestion from one of our listeners yet for this one, but I suggested it. And, we host the podcast, so sorry. We'll get to the other ones that we've seen suggestions for, but the 8mm-06, here's the deal. We were talking one time, spitballing, shooting the crap after a podcast, and throwing out ideas to Ryan for, hey, like Wildcat, what hasn't been done yet? And at one point in time, I started saying stuff like, okay, we'll stuff a 7mm bullet in a 30-06 case, to which you replied?
280.
Exactly. And then I was like, well, how about an 8mm? And then you replied?
8mm-06.
Right. And there was kind of a neat story. I found it rather heartwarming behind the creation of the 8mm-06, and I thought just kind of there might as well be a talk about this on the podcast. So why don't we go into this little bit of the history, where it came from, and shoot.
So World War II happened. A bunch of guys brought a bunch of guns back. Yeah. Things that had not come back with said guns was ammunition. It wasn't commercially viable at the time in the United States.
So, like, they're bringing back...
8 Mausers.
Oh, they're bringing about 8 Mausers from the Germans.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, 8 Mausers. So Mauser 98s. And great rifles. Really good, well-built, strong, smooth, reliable. Guys wanted to shoot them. Happy discovery, we found out that the case heads on an 8 Mauser and a 30-06 using a Mauser action would work very well together. They were compatible. So you just take the old 8 Mauser, as it was, and you'd run a 30-06 chamber reamer into it.
Okay.
Such an action created and birthed the 8mm-06. And now we have...
So they were literally stuffing 8mm bullets in 30-06 cases.
Yeah.
And they would run a... Wait, what reamer were they running?
A chamber reamer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I shouldn't say it was a chamber reamer. You're not taking it... I'll back up. So the internet's going to crucify me here. It wasn't a 30-06 chamber reamer into an 8mm Mauser rifle.
Right.
It was a modified 30-06 chamber reamer because we had 30-06 brass in the U.S. America's cartridge. Finest cartridge.
Oh, yeah.
We had the bore diameters already established. So we didn't have to take the whole darn barrel off the 8 Mauser and rechamber it in 06. We could just use the existing barrel.
Oh.
We run that reamer in there, and now we use 30-06 brass, which was plentiful, with the 8mm bore.
It's pretty slick.
Yeah.
30-06 necked up to
8mm.
8mm.
Also, provided a fantastic upgrade to the 06 with heavier weight bullets, potentially. You could get heavier weight 8mm, and you could 30s at the time, as a viable option for big game hunting. But it was a great way to take a rifle and somewhat, at the time, modernize it for the basement hand loader. You had this take-home trophy, if you will, and now it was very functional. And you didn't have to invest a ton of money into rebarreling a German Mauser.
Now, what's the deal with this one? It kind of was, we described it this way a little bit before we started podcasting here, and no offense to anybody who has one of these, because I still think it's really awesome, but it was a bit of a lead balloon in terms of never really caught on. I mean, the first time I heard about it was when I just spatballed this idea out at you.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many people have ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Right.
I was surprised to see it come up, because it's not super popular now.
It's still looked at as a wildcat.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yes. I think looking, post 1945 to, maybe the mid 1950s, late 1950s, I think it was very popular. It was a great way that you could breathe life, in modern life anyways, into these older Mausers, and get a little bit better performance than you would with the standard 8mm Mauser loading as well, which is ballistically
interesting.
Yeah, right between a 308 and a 30-06. They're very much kind of all the same critter, but in the 8mm 06 loading, it is hotter than standard 8mm Mauser. So I think it was popular then, but 8mm never did catch on as a great bore diameter in the U.S. Not the .323 diameter bullets that this rifle would have used at the time. Anyway, they never really made it, save for a couple of commercial loadings like 8mm Remington Magnum and 325 Wisdom. That's it. Those are really the only 8mm options that ever quote made it in the U.S.
Right.
Besides this.
And
So-
still kind of barely.
Yeah.
For those guys.
Yeah, correct.
It was less a story of the whole cartridge and more of just the projectile.
Yeah.
Just not a whole lot.
Uninspiring.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Is that because of its performance, or is that like it's uninspiring in terms of the way when I say 6.5, everybody's eyes light up, and then when you say 7, there's a lot of people who are a big fan of the 7mm Odd 8 podcast that we did. But when you say 7, it's not nearly as much of a I gotta have that.
Right.
Is it the same thing, or is it actually performance based?
No, it doesn't lack anything in performance. If we go over to Europe, 8mm Mauser is like 308. I mean, it's still loaded today by all the major European ammunition manufacturers, all the major European rifle manufacturers. It is the European equivalent of the 30-06 or the 308. They're interchangeable on game, and their cultural significance to the region is equivalent. So, like, we love the 30-06 and the 308. They love the 8mm Mauser and its offspring, whether that's 7mm Mauser, 6.5 by 57. The list goes on and on. 9.3 by 57. So it's a great caliber. There's nothing wrong with the caliber. Anything you would do with a 30-06, you could do with an 8mm Mauser or an 8mm Odd 6. In the U.S., though, it just never sparked.
Is that part of its problem, though?
Yeah.
Is that we already have an Odd 6. We've got all the stuff for the Odd 6. The Odd 6 works great. Why do I need essentially another 30-06?
Pretty
It's
much.
They
different.
made it to be able to shoot a cool gun,
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
it is. It is. I mean, if you look at the bullet, like a lot of people now are looking at figures like BC and sectional density and that kind of thing. If you look at an 8mm, like a .323 diameter bullet, and you compare it to a 30 or a 33 on either side of it,
Okay.
it's kind of like there's nothing special about that bullet diameter. It's BCs, it's SDs compared to bullets on either side of it.
It's not like Goldilocks where it's just right in
Nope,
the middle.
not really. From like a number standpoint. I have no qualms with the bullet diameter for hunting. I think it's great, but it doesn't have the BCs like you can get on a 30 with the sectional density of the 30s, and it doesn't have the BCs that you can get or the weight that you can get in a 33. However, as we've seen before and talked about in other podcasts, where unassuming calibers now become in craze, like 257 diameter stuff. That's up and coming. There's these new 257 diameter cartridges that are getting hot. 270. They've been bracketed on either side. In the case of the 25 by 6mm and 7mm, or 6mm and 6.5, excuse me. And in the case of the 270 by like a true 7 or a 7mm Rem Mag, for instance, and then the 6.5 on the other side of it. They've been these bracketed calibers that were meh for a lot of people. They were never considered great for, quote, long range. Well, then you just tweak the projectile, stay the same diameter, make it longer, give it a boat tail, and now all of a sudden it's, stardust.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it actually the projectiles that are changing that are kind of bringing some of these cartridges back into vogue, or people are excited about it again?
And you could do the same thing with an 8mm. Make it longer.
That was my next question.
Give it a cooler nose profile and a fancy boat tail, and watch people's eyes light up. Oh, BC, look at that. Same thing.
I'd be all about it.
Same thing.
You ever see many 8mm Odd 6s come through in your gun shop when you were working behind the counter?
I don't know that I've seen more than one.
What was the one like that you saw?
Sporterized Mauser.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in typical sporterized Mauser fashion.
You said there's a lot of interesting stories behind the 8mm Odd 6. I'm just
it's I think the rifles that come in with them are more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But like sporterizing, and I've talked about how romantic that is for me. Like, we were a nation that didn't have a lot coming out of the Depression, and then the big war effort went on, and people are donating their pots and pans to make bombers and all this stuff. And these guys come back and they want to get into hunting and shooting recreationally and for sustenance, and because it's a very American thing, and they bring back these guns
therapeutically, I'm sure.
Yes, they bring back these guns and repurpose them, and did so brilliantly. And I think it then has a very rich history in the U.S. of like us being industrious as a people.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was just going to mention, or kind of, that was my observation there. It's not like you go to a big gun retailer at that point in time and pick from hundreds and hundreds of models. It's, well, I got this one. Yeah. What can I do to make it work?
Correct. It might have been the rifle of the family.
Yeah.
I think we're a pretty spoiled gun culture nowadays, in which we have access to all these crazy different things, and this could have been the rifle. That went out there and took elk and deer and all this stuff. And it's unfortunate it didn't enjoy any real commercial success. But then again, it's kind of neat that it didn't. Yeah. Also,
to find one, I feel like would be really, really unique. I mean, like to your point, you've got a gun that not only was probably used in battle, because it was probably picked up off the battlefield somewhere. So it's used in battle. It's got that history to it. And then you have the fact that it's almost been converted, if you will, from being a Nazi arm to now, hey, this is for the good guys. This is for my family in the homestead. Yep. And then just the whole cartridge development of the 8mm-06. It's pretty. It's anytime you go to an antique store and they got some crazy sculpture made out of like old motorcycle and dishwasher parts, they just kind of bent up and welded together, and that's really cool. That's to your point. It is industrious, creative. There's other words for it that I'm sure are better to describe it, but it's
built from necessity.
Yeah.
Limited resources, necessity, availability, ingenuity.
There's no reason that this cartridge, though, if you have one, you should feel like, oh, I should have got a 35 Whalen or a 338-06 instead. No reason for that. Fine cartridge. There's a bunch of great bullets out on the market. You can even get high BC bullets for them. Like Nosler makes an AccuBond and 8mm. It's great. It's fantastic. Breathe life into that old gun. Use it.
Do it. I hope we see some people come out of the woodworks with some 8mm-06.
Yeah.
Gosh, if you have one, let us know.
Oh, yeah.
Send us a picture.
Super stoked about seeing that. So, okay. Well, I'd say something like, hey, thanks for the suggestion. Like I said, this is 100% our own suggestion.
Very selfish, Jim.
But as usual, thanks for listening, everybody. And, let us know if you have any other obscure cartridges around your own arsenal or stuff you want to hear about. All right. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Bye. Thanks, Ryan.